Welcome to the Man Up, Man Down podcast, presented by Volker Beluda and David Pawsey. We discuss the pressures and challenges faced by men approaching middle age that we're often too embarrassed to speak about with our friends. You can find us online at www.manupdown.com. Enjoy the show and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review.
So, welcome to another episode of Man Up, Man Down. So it's with a pleasure to introduce Jack Woodham to our listeners. So Jack is a co-founder of Menfulness and spearheaded key partnerships such as the Dad's Daughters Hair School. I'm all curious about. I mean, looking at you, Jack, all curious about the hair school.
Straight in there.
And the counselling partnership with Serendipity, which has resulted in over 500 referrals. He played a pivotal role in cultivating the male suicide project with York St. John's and securing a 10K grant for the year-long research known as Menfulness 2.0, where he serves as a co-researcher. As the suicide prevention lead, Jack conducts workshops tailored for colleges, specifically focusing on students in the construction industry and farming. So Jack, welcome to our podcast. Yeah, we went straight in there. Sorry.
That's all right. It's an easy win.
Yeah, I'm due a chop anyway, so I'm getting there. So it looks like it's voluntarily on your end, not like David and I, right? So, but tell us more about yourself and tell us more about Menfulness.
Yeah, I mean, where do we start? About 10 years ago, when my daughter was born, I was really struggling. My daughter has additional needs. She's got cerebral palsy. She has severe epilepsy, and I was wanting some, I suppose, just some male company. I was going to a lot of the mum and baby groups, but they just, for some reason, just wasn't it. They were nothing but lovely, and caring and supportive. But I just needed some male company just to be a bit honest about how I was feeling. And there wasn't much going on. So a good friend of mine who I used to work with, my wife said, "Oh, they've had a baby as well, Mike," and they said, "Why don't you get in touch with him and hang out?" And that's what we did. It was as simple as that. And we set up a group called Yorkie Dads, where guys can go and be honest. And most of us bleary-eyed, tired, exhausted. We're very good at being honest about how hard parenting is, as well as talking about just day-to-day stuff. And it was great. And we set up a breakfast club. I did bacon sandwiches, and we also looked after our vegan dads as well. And lots of mums were loving it. They were just sending us across, and really simple stuff. And following on from that, we set up a Lego group, and the hair school, the Yorkie Dads Hair School, where dads went along to plait their daughters' hair. And all of these events were really just getting guys together to talk, and giving us an opportunity to do that. And things just kept growing and growing. We were seen as quite a pivotal service, I suppose, within York. And we realized that a lot of dads a lot of guys wanted to join who weren't dads. So we ran like football and walking talks and all kinds of different events. And they wanted to join, and we were like, yeah, come along. It's not a problem. But we felt we needed something as well as that. So Menfulness was born, and so they're kind of working side by side, really, and Menfulness is just grown from strength to strength.
I mean, what you've said is certainly something I can relate to. In that, my partner works in sales, so she was always like the main breadwinner. And I was a lowly journalist when we had our daughter, and a journalist's wage. I was like, this isn't really going to cover the childcare.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's the point of spending, literally spending my wage when I could be spending time with my daughter?
Yeah.
And I mean, there at the time, I think I was living in Wimbledon. There was like a dad's group there, um, but I mean, we then moved to like where I live now, which sort of as I mentioned, is sort of down near Gatwick, but it's out in the sticks. I didn't really know anyone there. As I say, I was a stay-at-home dad slash freelancing, so it wasn't like I was moving, meeting colleagues, which I think is often kind of how you get into a social circle when you move to a new place.
Yeah,
And yeah, and I'd sort of be going to like toddler groups and things, but yeah, I think as a man, and even though and things have changed, I think dramatically since I was like when I was a stay-at-home dad.
yeah,
But yeah, it's sort of you'll read articles and hear things, and it's sort of like, oh, there's less of the stigma, but yeah, it can be difficult to kind of find your tribe, I think, as
yeah.
as a young dad. Um,
I
but
think
yeah,
so.
I mean,
Yeah, it's a real well, interesting when we set it up. Like, I've took for granted making friends. When you're at primary school, you go and knock on your friend's door, don't you? I think it was really simple, and then you wouldn't see your parents for 2 days. And then when you go to university as well, it's just like, well, you're in these ready-made tribes, and then suddenly when you're a dad, you're like, well, oh, I don't actually have any friends. And it just seemed so naturally and easy for my wife when she was at these baby groups. And like literally, she was bringing home 15 mums from the baby group, and they're all in my lounge, like eating cake and having a good chatter. And they got straight into it and to make friendship. And I was like, whoa, how do you do that? And you can't knock on your friend's door at 42, or your neighbour's door and go, oh, can Tim come out and play, please? Tim from finance. It just doesn't work. So and I think that's a struggle, and it is a real thing about loneliness and for men, and that's what we're trying to do to create is Menfulness as I suppose a group of guys getting together to really, if they want to be, they can be vulnerable, they can be honest. The badge itself gives permission to do that, but then just have fun and enjoy each other's company, and to actually say, oh, I don't have many mates, which is quite a big thing to say, and kind of go, well, suddenly you've got 50 mates here, and it's a huge thing that not many people talk about. I suppose we're in men in mental health and loneliness, and certainly in terms of the project and the work that I'm doing in terms of suicide prevention, it's a key factor as well as finance and health. But that connectiveness is a massive factor for guys. So when you're at that point and you're really struggling, and too many guys do, and sadly take their own life, we want them to have another option. We want them to have, oh, you know what, I might just contact Jack because we've talked about our mental health before, and there's other options. So that's just getting rid of that stigma.
I mean, it's you've hit on something there which I've never really sort of considered. Well, I think one is like loneliness, and I think that it's that thing of you can be surrounded by people and feel lonely. Um,
Mm.
but I mean, the thought that just struck me, which, as I say, and my daughter's now 15, my son's 12, so that
Yeah,
sort of aspect as well behind me. But it's that thing of when I think about it, I was and even though I don't consider myself to have been a young dad, I think I was 30. Was I? Well, yeah, I was around 30 when we had. I should be able to work out the maths. I know how old I am now. I know how old my
30
daughter
plus
is.
10.
Yeah. um, but yeah, so I was one of the first. So all my friends that, as you say, like that I'd met at uni, that I'd met at college, my
Yeah,
tribe, my brothers
yeah,
were in. Suddenly I'm in a very different situation to them. Um, and you'll be meeting other dads, but they could be a completely different age to you, completely different upbringing to you. So it's almost like you want to find friends, but you
yeah,
don't necessarily have like those natural things in common that might have traditionally brought you into a friendship group in the past.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's such a yeah, it's a stigma, isn't it, to guys? And I suppose, I mean, for thousands of years, that's what society has said, is that we are the providers and women are the caregivers. They stay at home and we go out and we hunt. And there's still part of that in your, and I think an important part in terms of finding your place and who you are. But times are certainly changing, and the world is evolving. But mental health is increasing, and I think we can overcomplicate things. But in terms of, like, we often say we don't have to solve, we can't solve all your problems, but you don't have to face them alone. And that in itself, to a place where you can go like this, is like with every bloke has the struggles, ups and downs. And I know after this hour conversation with you guys, I'll feel uplifted. I'll feel better. You haven't solved any of my issues, but I'll feel better for it, and it will reduce. And also knowing, oh, I've got a couple of friends now. I've got a couple of people that maybe I can reach out to if I'm struggling. I feel like we've got that connection. And but on a deeper level, like, to really, and it's taken me 40 years to realize that it doesn't have, it's important to have those, I suppose, have that banter and that kind of surface level stuff, because that builds connections and that friendship. But actually, when you realize you can have a really deep and meaningful conversation, and we try and do simple tools to give guys to allow that to happen. So we often say, where you're up to, how are you doing, 1 out of 5? Because I think what happens is, after a weekend and you go to work and you go, how's your weekend? Yeah, fine. Yeah, good. Okay, yours? Yeah, good. And it shuts the conversation. But that 1 in 5, it allows itself to encourage the conversation. So it's like, what? I'm at a 5. Like, why? Like, what happened at the weekend? Oh, yeah, I was out, or I had a really good weekend with my wife, or whatever. Or I'm at a 2. Oh, last week you were at a 3, Jack. What's happened? So, and then it's just, oh well, and it's just allowing that conversation, and we do that. So we do a check-in Tuesday, every Tuesday, with all the guys, where you're at, and it's just amazing to see, because I think it's a myth, isn't it, that guys don't talk. Give us the platform, the environment where there's no judgment, where it feels safe, and then often you see other guys who are dealing with the same stuff, so you're encouraged to do it. You're like, and only our talk group last week, there was 3 guys, because we have the talks groups are so large, we have 3 separate groups, and I remember talking to these 3 separate guys, and they're all dealing with the same thing, and suddenly they become the parent of their parents, and they're caring for them. I was like, I'm not in that situation right now, but I need to introduce you at the end to these guys. And you saw them together, and you could literally see them rise, kind of go, I'm not on my own with this. And yeah, not fixing each other, but certainly supporting each other and helping each other, and realizing that. And it's so isolating. And I think certainly with male suicide and suicidal ideation, the most common, the reason, what we hear, and the hook that saved them, more often than not, it was the presence of another human being. It was that, where there was no judgment, where it was just kindness, empathy, and love, that saved them. And you don't have to be a specialist to prevent it. You just have to be you, and listen, and kind of, I'm glad you told me. I'm proud of you for telling me. And it's never a eureka moment. It's never like, oh, fantastic. But actually, it's a bloody good thing, because they're not living with that themselves anymore. They shared it, and we know, in terms of prevention of suicide, the only way we can prevent it is by talking about it. And even as a guy that set up a charity, the suicide prevention charity, I still find the word uncomfortable to say. The guy that goes and delivers workshops, and that's important to say that it is uncomfortable. It's not normal, but what's the alternative if we know that that's the only way to prevent it, by having that conversation? And if you often, in terms of prevention, it's guys that guys that are connected, because we hide stuff from our wives. I hide stuff from the GP. People that are supposed to say, Jack, it will be okay. And we protect them. But mates notice stuff. You might notice something on a text message, like, or I'm having a bad day, or when I was over at college, some of the young lads were like, said, I knew James was really struggling because he always sends me abusive emojis, and I knew his mum and dad were having a breakup. So I was like, oh, and that was his gut telling him. So I said, oh, what did you do? And he said, I went and knocked on his door. So then what happened? And he said, oh, well, his mum came, and I told his mum, and he was furious. And I said, that will be a reaction. I said, how are you now, 6 months down the line? He said, I think he knows he's got me to go to. He knows that when he's in that situation, he's got me, and he knows he can have an uncomfortable conversation, and a real conversation about how he's feeling. I said, well, that's good enough. And that is a reaction, or could often a reaction, that somebody is angry when you ask them the question. But it's really difficult to stay angry with someone who's only showing love, compassion, kindness. Usually over time, it's like, oh, actually, Jack asked me that question because he was really worried about me. And then we've got an open dialogue. Then we've got other people. I know when I'm at my lowest, I've got people I can talk to at whatever time. I've got my 5 trusted people that I can talk to. And I think that's what we're trying to encourage, that work life is not linear. There's ups and downs for everybody, and trying to have those key contacts that you can make contact with when you're really at your lowest. And I would encourage anyone to find that. And that's what Menfulness is about, really, I suppose.
Well, there's a lot in there. Where do I start with questions? I mean, maybe I start with a comment. So we had Rose Rokins, I think you know her as well. Or you might not know her. So we had her on the podcast, and she's a suicide prevention. I call her a specialist. I don't know.
Rose. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Rose. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah, and she. I remember what she said. Exactly what you just said, right? You just have to talk to someone, right? If you think anything is up with someone, if you think anything is not 100%, the person is a bit different than usual, just ask them.
Yeah.
Because it's not a topic anyone wants to talk about, right? But if I think, I don't know, David has a problem, then, are you okay? Do you want to talk? You want to hop on a call? Or if you're on the pub, I noticed something was a bit off. Are you okay? And by offering that, I think that's so important. And we as you say, right, connectiveness. We are all human beings, right? We need that. We need to talk to people. We can't live in isolation and just, I mean, I always say I sit in my little box here, right, half a garage, right, converted, most of the days, and I hardly ever get out, and it's terrible. I mean, I have my wife coming home and the kids coming home and the dog and stuff, but we need to get out, and I do get out. So it's so easy these days to isolate ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, the Samaritans recently did a campaign called Small Talk Save Lives, which was really interesting, and they did that with Network Rail. Because a lot of people do, I suppose, when I go and deliver these talks, there's a real appetite for change, and people wanting to learn, but they're wanting to actually say, spotting the signs and a bit of myth busting, but then also, how do you actually ask the question? So they're all really keen on doing that, and there's an appetite for it. But a lot, and I do find that there's quite a noise around it, and language is really important, and I get that, and saying the right thing, but then a lot of people do get hang up on saying the wrong thing and don't actually say anything.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to say much. You just have to show, ensure that there's a space where if this person, and when you come to that point, it wouldn't just come as you in Tesco's and you see your friend. there will be a build up to it, and just make sure there's a safe space, I suppose, a place where they feel comfortable to talk. And you haven't got another meeting that you've got to rush to, that you're really going to listen. And then just say, I'm worried about you. Can we talk? I know you're going through a lot. And then as the question evolves, is being comfortable and confident to actually ask that question. A few of the things that you've been talking about, a few of the things that you mentioned. I know that your mum and dad are going for a breakup. I know you've said a few things that you want the world to stop and you've had enough. A few of these things, I'm worried. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about ending your own life? And being quite direct with it. And then it's the response. Can I be, oh no, don't, oh Jack, it's just, I'm just a bit overwhelmed, but thanks for asking. Or if it's a yes, and it's quite, if it's a yes, then it's like, I'm really, really, really pleased and proud that you told me. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about it. And what we need to know is that none of us have to be a prevention specialist. None of us at all. To have that conversation, but just knowing where the support is, and knowing, okay, let's find you support. Well done. Fantastic. Let's find you the support, and there is support out there, and let's find that together. And listen. They will feel, because automatically feel better for it, because it's out of them. They're not living with that. It's just a lonely place to live with suicidal ideation. And it's so common. Like it's 1 in 5 of us have suicidal ideation. It's very, very normal. And as the world is social media, it's just a scary place. And then when you're lonely with those thoughts, and often for guys, I suppose, there is more, there's outlets for women. Many people and many women do have suicidal ideation, but men seem to actively take their own lives, and it's often the ones that we hear about is the last person I would have expected. That phrase I keep hearing, and friends of mine that are taking their own lives are the last people I would have expected, who are supportive, who are similar to me, who put on a bit of a show, have a bit of a glow. And I wrote a poem called The Men Talking Revolution, which was kind of based on that. It was just, I keep hearing this all the time, the last person I would have expected. And it's those guys who don't access mental health support, those guys who on the face of it, you feel, you're doing really well. Who are successful. We work really closely with a charity called Charlie Dallas Lancaster Foundation. And Charlie was a man about town. He had Lancaster and Sam's, which is an estate agent. He was so successful, and he was the go-to person for support during lockdown. He was like, we'll get through this, guys. Don't worry. If anybody needs to reach out to me. I call him two shits. You've had one, he's had two. He was just an incredible human being who made everybody's lives and touched so many lives. And his legacy continues, because that does happen still. And he's somebody that I talk about often, just to kind of go, look, check in on your quiet friends, check in on your sad friends, but you definitely check in on your loud friends, on your out there friends, and trying to give each other opportunities and a place that you can be. And I think that pressure of there's so much bravado, isn't there, in us guys, and seeing that it's weak, and seeing, to speak up, it's such a difficult thing, but we need to get beyond that. We need to kind of get through that and smash through that and kind of go, look, I think it was Married at First Sight. I was watching it last year, the Australian, and forgot, and the lady said, superpower, vulnerability is a superpower. And it really is. And then she also said it's really sexy as well. So you guys are thinking you're manning up. Actually, it's really sexy. So I told the guys that at the talk group, and then suddenly they're all chatting. They were just like, "Oh, all right."
Yeah.
If it helps with my sex life, this is brilliant.
I'll update their Tinder app. I'm
Yeah.
vulnerable.
And it is. You only, it's like going to the gym, isn't it? It's like this. I feel
Yeah.
there's the serotonin, isn't it? It hits you. You feel better for it. You feel listening to other people and talking to you, David, and kind of like me opening up and kind of go, oh, that resonates with me. It's like I felt that way.
Hello folks, it's Volker here. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As you know, I coach executives, whether that is for leadership skills, or sales leadership skills, or working as a therapist too. There are few ways I can help you to get unstuck, improve your work-life balance, or become a better version of yourself. So you will be more productive and have more time for your family. Whatever it is, you can join my client list of people from General Electric, Pepsi, DHL, Boots, and many others. Book a free exploratory call via my website www.obnat.us. That's obnat.us. Now back to the show.
You see that in our talk groups all the time, and like guys giving me advice, and after come home, and Rose, my wife, has been telling me that for 6 months. She go, I've been telling you this for 6 months to do this,
Yeah.
Jack. And I go, oh yeah, well, and some stranger who sat next to you, who you don't know, and it's so impactful when I was having a really hard time with my daughter a few months back, and I said, I'm not going to host this talk group because I feel like I need it. And I just mentioned and just opened up, and this just went, oh, Jack, that sounds really shit. And that was enough. Jack, that sounds shit. I'm really sorry to hear that. And because he's not supposed to say it, he's quite the particular guy, I didn't really know him, but he's quite a quiet guy. It was so impactful. It was just like, oh, I really needed that. And I think he just patted my arm, just went, sounds really shit. I'm sorry to hear that. So you don't need to do much to make a difference, but you just need to have that place and that freedom and that clear honesty that you can talk and there's no judgment for it. And what's happening now is, which is amazing. We had all these talks and we're setting up. We're a charity now, Menfulness, and we did all this and encouraging guys to talk and open up. But then we found that they were, and we had I suppose a statutory duty to these guys who were opening up. And 9 times out of 10, it was this type of talk. It was like, it felt better, chewed the fat, and you moved on. But there was 1 in 10, and we're like, oh, this is heavy. I feel that we'll be able to support, but our volunteers, they were just like, I'm really worried about this person. And so we would say, well, they need to go to statutory services, they need to go to the GP, or they need to go to crisis. And they would then say, well, they sent them to us. And we're like, oh, okay. So we felt we needed another offering. We felt that we needed something to react quickly to the guys who were struggling. So we set up a counselling service with serendipity counselling. A really good friend of mine, Sinead, who I used to work with the council, set up privately, and she said, yeah, I'll be keen on doing this. So that's where all of our fundraising goes to our counselling. We've had over 500 guys, often guys who are at crisis, access that counselling. And it all goes full circle because now these guys want to fundraise for us because at a time of need for them, we supported them and they want to give back. So at the York 10K, we had 45 runners. And it was such a proud moment because I knew at least 30 of them have access to our counselling. But what's absolutely mental about it is we talk. One, it's free, there's no waiting list because we use students from York St John University, and so they come on placement. So we just shipping the students who are in the third year 100 hours placement. So there's no waiting list, but it's the stigma. It just normalizes accessing mental health. So you'll hear these guys like talking about the footy score and work and kids, talking about counselling, and like it's top trumps. It's just like they would just be like, "Oh yeah, what's Claire like? Yeah, she's really good. Oh yeah, I have Steve. Yeah, he's a sound guy, isn't it?" And just talking like, and I often go, "Whoa, this is really good, but we need to remember this isn't normal for guys to one talk, but to talk so freely about accessing therapy." And I believe, because I've had counselling for many years, I've honestly think it's a preventative measure for many, but I think it should be universal entitlement for everyone. I think everybody should have it. The difference that you get from a professional, and that's what's been mad about Menfulness's journey. I think we're really lucky that we can respond because we're a charity to need. There's less red tape. It's just like doing what needs to happen. And I think many, when you work with the council, they're like, we would love to work like that. We would love to kind of go, oh, okay, this is what the guys are telling you. And all of the different events. So we've got a menu, Menfulness menu. So we're trying to make a serious subject fun, but within that, because we've got loads of professionals were getting in touch going, "Oh, what events do you have, Jack?" And it's just like, "Oh, we've got the podcast, we've got an allotment group, we've got running clubs, we've got boxing, we've got football, we've got the walk and talk, often a lot of older guys in the talk group. We've got loads. And these are all run by volunteers who have been part of the group and go, you know what, I fancy doing this. I think there's scope for this." We just started the boardroom, which is like board games, because loads of guys were going, "Oh, I really fancy playing a bit of chess, backgammon, Dungeons and Dragons, and geeking out together. Do you think we can do it?" I'm like, yeah, crack on. So we set up the menu. You probably won't be able to see it, but it's really cool because you've got like the special, which is our counselling service. You've got the starter. So a lot of guys are like, "Well, what Menfulness about?" So that's our podcast and the WhatsApp group. And we've got the vegan option, which is an allotment. We've got the mains, Menfulness nights. That's a talk group. The
Love it.
boardroom. We've got healthy option, the walk and talk, social football running club, rally together, and sweet treats, which is a pretty Platts hair school. And takeaways as well. We've got merch as well, and the testimonial takeaways and stuff, which is a absolute genius. And I can't take any credit for that idea. That's Sam, my fellow trustee. But the menu to kind of go, oh, well, what do you have? And we feel like we know that talking is our strapline is don't man up, speak up. But actually, the research suggests there's lots of different ways to supporting your own mental health. And talking is certainly one of them if you can get there. But if you don't feel able to, go in for a dog walk, making sure that you have tea with your wife every night and making sure that you talk about your day, whatever it be. So our strapline is don't man up, but then it's don't man up, lace up. So go for a run. So come to a football or don't man up, walk up for the walk and talk. So
I mean, it's incredible because you're sort of, well, the number of groups that we've interviewed, and it's kind of like, well, I was a member of Man v Fat Football, and
yeah, cool.
but you and we've like interviewed talk groups, and I think the common theme is that everyone's different, and
Yeah.
everyone, like, each environment's different, and those different environments still sort of foster open conversation. But it's interesting that sort of getting round to that happens in very different ways. And yeah, it's just incredible that you're like, well, we've got the football, but we've got the running club as well, because runners aren't necessarily footballers.
Yeah.
We've got the walk and talk, we've got the board games. And yeah, it's like, wow, you've kind of encapsulated everything into sort of one group.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, sort of. So just going back to something you said right at the start about how you'd come home and your wife's got 15 friends there and they're all chatting away. I mean, and sort of one of the, you sort of said about the walk and talk, and one of the groups we interviewed was or the man shed, where the idea is, these guys come together and they'll fix something, and through that conversation comes about.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and another thing that I heard, and I can't remember whether it was on a different podcast or someone we interviewed, but it was the phrase that men don't talk face to face. They're more comfortable talking
Oh, yeah.
shoulder to
That's true.
shoulder. And it was sort of like, well, we spent hundreds of years marching into battle, and perhaps that's where it comes from. But
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
what I guess my question is, why is it men sort of need that little push or that prod, which women don't, especially when, from what you're saying and from, as I say, the number of interviews we've done, once you hit that spark, you can't put it out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so, I mean, I'm sort of gone a bit of a ramble now, but
No, I
again,
get it.
like the thing that you say about paying it forward or paying it back, and again, it's almost like this is how the podcast came about. And I think sort of a lot of what we talk about, Volk has almost seen it as, how does he elevate himself? Whereas I'm like, well, how do I bring myself up to baseline normal? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's yeah. So why is it women find that so easy?
I don't know. I mean, it's something that I still find, like, even setting up the charity. I mean, my mum always said, because I'm one of six boys, so we've got five brothers,
Right.
Wow.
and she said there was a lot of
So you
farts.
could have just created a men's group
Yeah,
from your
yeah,
family.
exactly. And still now, like, I mean, we're very close, but and Menfulness has brought us closer because it's given us permission to, like, be really honest, like, whereas it was kind of like, always knew we were there for each other, but fairly superficial level. But, like, I mean, my mum said I always used to have the best conversations with you, and I would never kind of go, come sit down and have a chat. It's like, it's still, if my wife or my mum say that to me now, it fills me with dread. I'm like, I don't want to chat. I don't want to chat. Or and they say, well, go for, so mum says, if you're talking to a teenager, go in a car. Like, go in a car and drive alongside them, so you're doing something. So the purpose isn't for the talk. The purpose is because you're going to shops, but it allows that conversation, and it just naturally, organically happens. I suppose it's how you badge them. It's a lot of, like, statutory services like that I'm working with, and we're trying to tell them is like, look, you need to kind of let that less clinical space if you want to prevent it, if you want people to come in. So it's I suppose it's how it's badged. But I mean, as I said, going for coffee is something that I always, maybe because of how we've been brought up, but it's just like, I find it so difficult. But even our talk group, we have pizza, and we have cakes, and it's just, for half hour before the talk group, especially for the new guys coming in, it just allows that conversation just to feel comfortable with it, and it's finding that comfortable space. And the walk and talk, I suppose, they don't have to talk. They can just walk along. They can bring the dog, and they don't have to. The talk is the side product, but we're trying to find these, like the Lego group for the dads group. It was like, there was just, I mean, the dads were really into it. You should have seen some of the stuff they're building, but it just, you could see it allowing those conversations, and exactly the same as the hair school. So, like, some of my best mates I met at the hair school, just kind of like, just having a laugh. And I mean, I set it up, and I'm still useless, like so useless. And I just sit there and I comb my daughter's hair, and that's a win that she's not crying, and to be with those guys all dealing with. So yeah, I do think it's a myth that we don't talk. It's finding that environment and space to feel, oh, you know what, I'm going to do that. And that's why our talk group is over at the Knights, the community stadium. It's not clinical at all. It's a place where all these guys go and see the football and the rugby club all the time. And it's just a space where it's secondary, the talking, but that being comfortable and finding that space where you all feel like, oh, I have got permission to talk if I want to. Then we do, but never having a coffee and a chat. It's just like, oh no, let's even just like, can we just go have fish and chips, or you know what I mean, do something a bit more less serious because you worry, don't you?
I mean, where do we find your group? Is it just in York, or do you have Menfulness across the UK?
Yeah, so hold that thought, I suppose.
Yeah.
There has been some. We did some research with York St John University Institute of Social Justice, and some of the findings were just like mind blowing. Anecdotally, we know we're making a difference. Guys are telling us, but sometimes you have to speak the language of the people and the funders that you're talking to, and the stuff that was coming out of that was just, of the 300 guys he interviewed, most of them had suicidal ideation before Menfulness. 17 of them actually attempted to take their own life, and since Menfulness has been 0. So we know what we're doing is having an impact, and there's been a few people get in touch who want us to grow. I would suggest starting at the north, but because it's all voluntary, it's quite a difficult thing to run within our own city. So we're working with people with some for funding and scope and growth, and we might be going across, hopefully, to the East Coast at some point. Scarborough, Whitby way. There's a high level of need over there, so we would like to go over there. But it's all funding and capacity. But we know the model works, and we know that we could make it grow. So I suppose shout out to if anybody wants to see it grow.
Yeah,
and we'll have a conversation about and how it works and what we can do.
Yeah, because I think what David said is so spot on, right? I mean, we interviewed a few groups, right? We had a few groups on the podcast, and you kind of encompassing them all, right? And I think that the concept makes, at least to me, makes perfect sense, right? So yeah, so shout out to anyone who wants to get involved. I think it's a great initiative.
Any angel investors out there?
Yeah.
Come to us. Yeah, I need a holiday.
Well, after you've invested in Man Up, Man Down, of course.
Yes.
But,
we could do some research like Las Vegas or something, surely.
Yeah. Let's do that. I mean, we if I say we're almost at the end already. I mean, this time just flew past.
It has.
But some of the stuff you said, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on emotional intelligence, and one of the books in my blurred background is Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her. She did a TED talk on vulnerability.
Yeah.
So definitely worth watching if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, will do.
So yeah, it's so true, right? We should be more vulnerable. We should be more emotional, but it's so difficult for men, right? And what totally resonated for me was, my wife keeps telling me things, and it goes in here and goes out there, right? And then just a post-it tells me the same stuff, right? And I go like, yeah, that makes sense. It's I think it's just the way we have our relationships with women, right?
I just got to say that I started chuckling there, and the reason I was chuckling is because someone recommended that TED Talk to me, and I was watching it on a train, and I did start having a bit of a tear, which I was like, but I'm like, I'm living what Renee's preaching, but I didn't quite intend on being vulnerable on a train full of other passengers.
But she actually, I think it was in that book as well. She said there was one, in terms of talking to strangers or talking to people, right? I think it was a lady that was crying at an airport, and she went over and said, "Are you okay?" And and she just struck her off, and then 5 minutes later, or I don't know, half an hour later, she came over and said, actually, yeah, my dog died, right, or whatever it was, and then they had a bit of a conversation, and and I think when they got off the plane later on, she waited for her and gave her a big hug, the lady that lost her
Oh,
dog. And it's just that connectiveness, right? And this vulnerability, and letting other people into our lives we don't even know, because most people mean well, right? I mean, we always, we're watching the news and we always think, the world's an awful place, right? And I mean, look at a couple of countries in this world, and you think, that could be true, but it's not, right? The majority of people are actually really nice and they want to help you, and we often forget that. So it's great what you guys are doing. I mean,
thank you.
yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I think we've always wanted to normalize vulnerability and mental health and support. And what's the great thing is it's such a leveler in so I think we always some in terms of like your status and who you are. And often like the first thing people ask is when you meet up with other guys is what's your job, what do you do? And it's like, okay, I'll put you in that box. Okay, and we try our best. We don't like push it, but we say if we can kind of not talk about certain subject, about like your career, or maybe religion, or just like, or certainly when the elections are going on, because it's such a dividing topic. So we try to bring people together, and to realize that like there's guys that are coming who I know who are CEOs of multi-million pound places who've just had kids who are struggling. And then we've got guys who are coming along who have been referred across by adult social care who are having a hard time. And what's the beauty of it is just like, well, we are all human beings, we all came in and we're going to leave. And it's about connectiveness and in this time that we've got, and sharing that, oh, okay, and you can see it in each other's eyes. It's like, oh wow, well you drove in a Merc, and look at you're like you're in bits, and it's just like, oh, it's universal. It can
Yeah.
entitle anybody can get it.
I mean, it's obviously I sort of said at the start of the podcast about when you first become a dad, and and I'm like, oh well, suddenly all these other people that you don't have stuff in common with. But what and then as well, following on from what we've discussed, it's like,
Yeah,
well, actually, once you do have that conversation, suddenly you realize that actually you've got a lot more in common with that person than you
yeah.
originally thought. And I mean, it's sort of interesting what you say about business leaders and CEOs, and I guess, well, especially like in my 20s and 30s, you're like, oh yeah, they've got an easy life. They don't really seem to do any of the work. They just chuck out the orders and pocket the cash. And then as I get older, and and a lot of my friends and peers are in that position, it's like, actually, I can't imagine how they deal with that stress. And as you say, sort of during the pandemic, whereas I was like, oh, I could lose a contract here. I've got a friend who's worrying about his 50 employees. And, it's like, yeah. And it's that thing of like, well, yeah, as you say, you might see the fact they're driving around in a nice car, but you don't see the metaphorical weight on their shoulders. Um,
No, exactly that. And we try and all, and it's interesting what you're saying. Although the mums were fantastic, and they're still good friends of my wife's now, and they've connected. But what I liked about the guys is that when we did meet and we felt comfortable enough to be honest, we were really honest about being a dad, and just like, oh, I love my kid, but it's shit. It's really hard, and um,
Sorry, yeah, that was pretty much the phrase that I had in my head. Was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're great, but they can be pretty shit.
But I remember like when Rose was like, before she was giving birth, like some of the mums were like, there's so much pressure on having a natural childbirth, and then also it's like, oh, are you breastfeeding or not? And I mean, you get like, look, you can look at your 15 and 12-year-olds. It doesn't matter now, does it? It's like, oh yeah, well, they were definitely breastfed. You could
Yeah,
tell.
he was definitely a bottle.
Yeah,
He's a formula baby.
It's just like the nonsense that comes with it. And I was just like, I always felt like, oh, actually, when the guys did get together, it was just like, yeah, oh God, this is. I was really excited about being a dad, and it's the most amazing times, but also the absolute hardest times as well. So we got straight to the point where we got together, and just like, yeah, pass me the coffee on a drip and give me that bacon sandwich, because this is hard work, isn't it?
Awesome. Unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap it
Oh,
up.
it's been
But,
great.
I mean, this has been incredible, Jack. I mean, one thing I just want to say is, sort of one of my big bugbears that I've had is the inability. Well, how many barriers there are to accessing mental health support, and hearing that you can, and also, I guess, I've often thought, well, what happens when you do get someone coming to a man's group where you're like, this is well above what we can cope with. So hearing that you've got that kind of channel, and and I'm thinking, well, you're helping the students, helping them build up their hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's like you've got a perfect sort of solution there. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling, as I say, because we are running out of time.
Thank
So
you.
if people do want to find out more about Menfulness, where do they go?
Yeah, you can find us at menfulness.org. It's with one L. You can see us on all the social medias. We're quite active on that. And we've got all the lots of podcasts as well, which are great in terms of showing people what we're about. So there's loads on Instagram, and wherever we should be, we are at. I'm not very good with the old social media. I get some younger trustees to come in to do that, but they're very good at it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time. Keep up the amazing work. And I mean, as we often say, it would probably be great to get you back for a part 2, because I feel like there's lots of things we could have discussed, but sadly time isn't allowed. But anyway, thanks very much, Jack.
Yeah, take care, guys. Lovely to meet you both.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Feel free to reach out to Volker or David via our website, www.manupdown.com, or podcast@manupdown.com, with any feedback or to let us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Hear you again soon.